What's up guys, my name's Max, this is 999 Laser, and as you can see we've got a slightly different video coming to you today. We're in the studio and I'm joined by Roland Shaw, who you might recognise from some of our videos in the past, some of our workshop videos. And today we're going to be talking about a new situation, a new problem some would say, that we're seeing in the UK, and that's to do with fuel. From the 1st of September 2021 in the UK, all petrol stations, all fuel stations had to offer E10 fuel as their standard fuel. Now, Roland, for those of the guys watching at home that don't know the difference between different types of fuel, let's talk about it. So E5 fuel and E10 fuel, what's the difference?
E5 has been around for a little while now. It's got 5% ethanol in it. The purpose behind it isn't anything to do with environment as far as what comes out your exhaust system. It's the fact that it can be sourced locally and so forth. And yeah, so from a carbon footprint, it's better for the environment to a degree. So there's 5% ethanol in there.
And that's what we've been using for a while now.
It is.
Standard pump fuel.
Yeah, I think the main thing to kind of get about that is the fact that, and there are still companies that haven't got any ethanol in it, so when they're on the E5 they don't have to have any in at all. So from 0 to 5% ethanol is classed as E5, and even a fuel with 1% or no percent of ethanol, it will still say E5 on the petrol pump. E10 is a minimum of E6, or a minimum of 6% ethanol going up to 10% ethanol.
And that's what we've seen introduced. You'll see signs in the petrol station now saying E10 fuel.
Yeah, check your engine from the manufacturer and so forth, yeah.
So that's what people are concerned about at the moment, because originally I thought that all pumps were going to be E10 from now on, and like, oh crap, what am I going to do if I'm running a motorcycle or an older car? It's not friendly for those kind of things, is it? No. So just talk about what it is friendly for and what it's not. Okay.
So E10 in a normal cooking car, so your usual car that you'd quite happily use to go to work and back, getting yourself your 30-40 miles per gallon, your average 4-seater vehicle, and the normal circumstances, the fuel will go through the injection system through into the engine and cause no real harm to anything. It's not under any great stress or pressures, and the ethanol is not coming in contact with any of the metals that would be particularly affected by it. Seals and so forth that are within the injection system and within the fuel pump system in modern engines is designed to be resistant to the effects of the acids in ethanol. So from that point of view, everything's all fine. It's when you then start to look to higher performance engines where burn speed of the fuel becomes more important. There is can be issues with that. And then the other thing is that when you start to run with two-stroke engines which are carbureted, where the actual fuel and two-stroke oil goes around the crankcases, coats all of the bearings, it's part of the lubrication system, and that married together with a engine that is designed to perform to its maximum, so burn speed becomes very, very important. So all of your ignition timing, all your carburation settings, your exhaust design, the compression, everything is quite critical and is really quite close to the limit. Then when you start to introduce E10, you can have reliability issues with water being, ethanol has the effect of separating water out of the air, and if you get that in an engine, you leave it overnight, it can cause excessive corrosion in a relatively short period of time, which is very, very bad news. The other things that you can have with E10 on a high performance engine, particularly if it's got a very aggressive high performance exhaust system on it and with different ignition timings and so forth, is that you can find seizing up of the piston due to exhaust gas temperatures. Can also be a problem with running something like E10.
And since we've seen the introduction of E10, you have seen from your side in your workshop an uptick in phone calls and problems of people seizing and problems with engines. Your theory is it could be to do with...
Yeah, you can never, unless you're there, unless you're working with, unless you're in a controlled environment. But I would certainly say there does seem to be a lot more numbers of people that you generally find are quite, you sort of trust them with the way they look after their engines, they look after their air filters properly, they change their parts regularly. Some of those guys, beggars believe that even have decided, oh, I'm going to try some E10 and see what it's like, on some idea that they might get more performance from it. And then within 20 minutes, half an hour, they've had crankshaft issues. Now, whether or not they are it's a little bit of speculation. That it's not a controlled environment. It's not a given that you put E10 in a two-stroke and your crankshaft's just going to fail. But I'm getting an awful lot, like a ridiculous amount of seized pistons coming my way. Bikes I've known nothing of, just people who know me or think that I do a lot with fuel and bike setup, to sort of have suddenly started questioning why they're having a lot more mechanical issues. This may well be the fact that E5 in the past was maybe E1 or 2, or even not E at all. This now is up being supplied at the limit of E5, so we're starting to see a little bit of that. Where I have seen E10 in engines, I have seen some fairly badly seized pistons. So there are other things that are going to need to be done, a little bit like in the previous times when we went from leaded to unleaded fuel. There were changes that were required to work with this fuel that aren't going to happen overnight. And yeah, it's but in the meantime, you need to kind of be on your guard a little bit.
So at the moment, you can still buy E5 fuel from fuel stations, but it tends to be the more expensive super unleaded stuff, isn't it? The E5 stuff that you're getting. So your advice would be definitely go to the E5 stuff. But what else can you do to make sure that E5 fuel is correct for the situation that you're running your race bikes, for example?
Yeah. Certainly the things that I've done since the middle of this year, when I've noticed change even with E5, there are things such as making sure that you run a premium two-stroke oil. So there's plenty of them about, but there are some particularly good brands. The other thing is maybe you want to consider, because ethanol and so forth, normally to use a castor based oil or a castor mix. There are several brands. The oldest one in the book is the Castrol, but you've got them from Butylene, from Maximus, and several other manufacturers do a castor based oil that has better filming than a lot of the other, so your mineral and your synthetic oils. They don't have the filming properties, so they don't cover the metal better. So within your engine, you're more protected with a castor based oil than you are with others, because it's that stickier, gloopier that coats metal and it stays stuck to the metal. So that will then protect it from water more, which is being drawn out the air by the ethanol. Several companies have started, I think, to have a stabiliser. This will actually stop the acid effect of ethanol in your fuel. It's very, very little. In fact, what's in there, what you would actually run of that stuff per year would cost you less than what it would take to fill that can. So it's not, it's very small amounts of this stuff.
What do you do with that then? You fill up a can like this and then put a drop in on?
It's like 1 mil per litre. So it's 1 to 1,000. So it's a very small amount that you would put of that. And there's others. Butylene, I see they've launched a product. There's plenty of other products out there. They all sort of call themselves ethanol stabilisers and all that sort of stuff. So there's potential for a good plan, a good idea with that. Depending on your federation, and again, I race with the AMCA this year and there's no real fuel control within the AMCA. What I chose to do was to put 1 litre of avgas with 4 litres of petrol. That again,
avgas being
aviation fuel, they're 100 low lead, which actually has not got the effect of anything to do with the mechanical side of it within the drawing out of water out of the air that ethanol causes. But what it does do is it does slow the burn speed of the fuel down. So this whole seizing of pistons and things really does get, it does, for me, it's worked. So 1 litre in 5 of that has been perfect for me. We've run at a decent level, pushing the bikes very, very hard in some hard environments with some sensible jet settings and engines performing very, very well, and with 100% reliability. So that side of it has worked for me. It's not that easy to get. You have to put in the big effort to get it. There are quite a few race fuels out there. I would probably suggest for a lot of people, if your budget can stretch to it, to get a control fuel. Pantone, several other Golf. It's more expensive than pump fuel, but it's not that expensive. It certainly doesn't compare with some of the high octane, high oxygenated race fuels that are probably they can be 2 or 3 times the price. But what you can do with that stuff is it isn't necessarily that you're gaining performance, but what you're doing is you're eliminating the risk of picking up a bad fuel or a bad batch. Just with a control fuel, something like the Pantone or Golf and several other companies, they do it. It's not a Fandango, it just is 98. It's got no ethanol in it. It is controlled, it is correct, it's sealed, it hasn't gone off, it's not tied, it's not sat in a petrol station for 3 months. It is a proper, you get what's on the tin. So that is another sensible option for people.
So kind of in a summary then, if you're a regular club rider and you've been to the the pumps to fill up your cans for your race at the weekend, and you've seen these signs about E10 and you're slightly worried about it, you would suggest avoid E10 entirely.
Yeah.
Maybe go for the E5 and use some of these products.
Yeah.
Or on the other hand, you can go race fuel, controlled fuel route, and
absolutely
that should kind of be okay.
Yeah. I would say certainly a stabiliser from one of the different companies. So it's not a lot of money. It's not like you're carrying a big tub of something around. It's easy. It's made easy for you to use and so forth. So I think there is quite some merit of that. People like Castrol, people like your Puteline and so forth, they're not idiots. You know, they do know what they're doing, and they've been producing this for other motorsports and so forth for a very long time. So you know, they know more than enough. You know, they're smart people. So and they believe in it. So I tend to run with that.
And we're specifically talking about the UK at the moment, but the transition to E10 is an environmental thing, isn't it? So it is something that we probably expect to see around the world.
We're not the first. America's had it for a while now. Holland's had it for over 12 months, and they've had some real disasters with it. You know, I've seen some jetting specs that are being used out in Holland last year in an attempt to try and sort out the reliabilities and the issues that we're now potentially would be having with E10 if we'd all jumped on it. So yeah, it's not new, and I was kind of half expecting it, but you know, I wasn't quite expecting the deluge of phone calls and pictures. You know, my messenger book from Facebook is absolutely full of people I've never spoken to before with pistons that are seized, you know, so yeah, be careful.
The reason we started talking about this is because we went out on our road bikes, and I just went to fill up my Harley and put some E10 in there by not even realising, and he was like, oh my God, what are you doing? I'm like, what's going on? And that's when we started talking about it. So it's not just your motocross bikes, it is your road motorcycles and your older cars as well. You can look up online to see whether your car or your bike is suitable to use E10, can't you? But even you found that maybe some of those guidelines aren't necessarily correct. Maybe
I think for most modern, again with your Harley, with respect, it's not really pushing out every ounce of horsepower that could be produced by it. It's quite a lazy, cruisy bike. So in reality, the chances are it's okay. And again, as I said, the delivery of fuel to the piston on that engine is is not going through, you know, it's not going past your crankshaft, and it's not sitting there on all the bearings. You know, it's going through some aluminium and some Nickersil, and that's its lot. So it's not really, you know, it's not like the same as you're finding within a two-stroke.
There is a government site where you can check your vehicle against this new E10 fuel and see how it will affect it. Some of the manufacturers just say that motorcycles will be affected, or they'll be affected in colder weather or things like that. Another thing to kind of mention as well is storage. Obviously, dirt bikes specifically, you might go ride on the weekend, or especially we're coming towards autumn and winter now, you might go and ride it and leave it sat there for a couple of months.
Yep. That's
when the ethanol can do a lot of damage, can't it?
It can indeed, because again you'll have an engine that is coated, all your metal parts. You've got, again, notoriously, it's very nice if you've got an air conditioned or a sorted garage, but for the average guy who's locking it up in his shed, you know, it's going to be subject to a lot of humidity coming in through within the engine, a lot of rise and fall in atmospheric temperatures. So again, a lot more condensation. So it's storage wise, I would certainly suggest really adopting a policy of draining down. If you're going to leave the bike for some time, drain the fuel tank down, getting rid of that fuel, empty your carburetor as well. And if anything, probably there are, you know, it's trying to make it realistic so that people will adopt it, I hope. But I would certainly, if you're going to leave the bike for any amount of time, I would look to put some oil down your spark plug hole and just turn the engine over a few times, or have your piston at bottom dead centre, so it's at its lowest point. Put some oil down there, let that run down around your main bearings and so forth. Just roll the engine over a few times, just allow the lubrication to get in and around if you're going to leave it for a while.
So for those watching that don't know how to do it, how do you drain your carb?
Okay, it's a simple process as you would do to change your main jet. So you turn your petrol tap off, and then you need to remove the 17 or 14 millis, the normal sized nut that's on the bottom of the bowl of the carburetor, and drain the fuel off. Obviously putting some kind of tray underneath your bike to capture that fuel.
Have a nice puddle in
That's right, yeah. So yeah, and then put the nut back on. But I would, yeah, seriously can't endorse enough. I don't think it's a good idea for periods of time of leaving fuel in petrol tanks, and certainly to use fuel a few years ago, let alone now E5 stuff. I certainly wouldn't recommend anybody leave that for 3 or 4 months in your bike and then think you're going to top it up with something else or just run it as it is. I think you're asking for trouble.
So I hope you guys found this video useful and informative, and we know that we're talking about the UK at the moment, but we know that we have subscribers from around the world. So let us know in the comments what experience you guys have had with this E10 fuel, if you've used it in your country. So yeah, jump in the comments down below and let us know your experiences, and if you've got any questions, send them across as well, and I'll shoot them to Roland and he can answer them. Once again, thanks for watching, guys. I'm Max, that's Roland, this is 999 Laser. You might recognise Roland from the Megalodon series actually, and he was kind enough to let us take the beast on his dyno last week, so keep an eye out for that. That video is coming very, very soon. But until then, we'll see you next time.